Taigong Wang, also known as Jiang Ziya, Liu Shang, Duke Tai, and... okay, look, this guy has a lot of different names, okay? Anyway, what about the Taigong Wang of Fate Grand Order? How well does he compare to his historical and mythological counterpart? And what grade would I give his depiction? Let's get into it. First, fair warning, I'm bad at pronouncing Chinese names. I'm gonna try, but this language does not make it easy. What with how saying a word in a slightly different way can mean something completely different. Please don't kill me for this. Moving on, Taigong Wang is a rider class servant, which is an interesting case for sure, because in most respects he is more caster than rider. This is even recognized in-game, where he mentions that not only can he be summoned as a caster, he would be a candidate for being a grand caster. So why is he a rider then? Well, Wang was a general who commanded armies, and so naturally he had something to ride, and what he had in the classic story Investiture of the Gods was something quite unique. To make a long story short, he ended up with a special mount that combined features of a deer, ox, horse, and donkey. Actually, a species of deer, the Pierre David's deer, has become associated with Wang's mount, with the mountain deer sharing the same name, Sebu Shang. Sadly, this culturally significant deer was hunted to extinction in China, but a handful of them that were taken to European zoos survived, have multiplied, and are now slowly being reintroduced back to China. Anyway, while caster might have been the best class for Taigong Wang, rider still works for him. Getting into his character design, Wang certainly has that traditional Chinese look to him with the clothes he is wearing. He definitely looks the part of a sage or a strategist, though it might be a bit too fancy, since Wang is meant to be from a much earlier time period. One thing though is that Wang's depiction in various sources can vary quite a bit. When he was found by the king and asked to serve as an advisor to help overthrow the Shang dynasty, Wang was already in his 70s. Naturally, depicting him as an older man makes sense, but he is also often shown as being much younger. Something about how while 70 is old by most standards, it is not that old by the standards of mythical Taoist sages, and so making him look younger isn't completely weird. All in all, I'd say Taigong Wang has a good design that fits his character, that of a wise and sage-like being who serves well as an advisor. Getting into his skill set, Wang's first skill is Primitive Tactics, increasing quick card effectiveness, attack, and MP strength for all allies for 3 turns. Now, I have to question the localizers about this one, especially when the FGO wiki gives it a rough translation of the original Art of War, which is a much more fitting name. Taigong Wang was known as an excellent strategist, and his teachings ended up being compiled into a book called The 6 Secret Teachings. Now, its exact date of completion is unclear, but Taigong Wang predates the much more famous Sun Tzu by over half a millennia. So the name Primitive Tactics, I'd rather use the word ancient rather than primitive, since primitive makes it sound like the tactics are really basic or unsophisticated. Anyway, naming issues aside, this skill works well. Taigong Wang's second skill is Fengshen Zixing, which inflicts skill seal to all enemies for a turn, as well as giving himself special attack damage against divine and demonic enemies for 3 turns. This skill is one of Wang's special talents, specifically made for use against divinities and demons, which he had to face quite a few of during the novel Investiture of the Gods. He also notably uses it in story during the events of Tunguska Sanctuary, though it only has limited effect for reasons I'll get into later. Suffice to say, this is an excellent skill for him to have. Lastly, Wang's third skill is Thought Keys, increasing his own MP gauge by up to 30%, and then charging the MPs of everyone in the party by up to 20%, effectively making this a 50% MP charge for himself. This skill is Wang making use of Taoist arts, something he also makes heavy use of in his mythical version where he has been turned into a Taoist sage, because before he was only a mere advisor, strategist, general, duke, master fisherman, and rider, and I thought Galahad was bad. Anyway, this skill represents his talent for using this type of magecraft, which he uses in a wide variety of ways both in his original stories and in FGO. This is fine. Taigong Wang's noble phantasm is Da Shenbian, whereupon he goes fishing, tosses his rod into the lake, only to have said rod emerge from the heavens to smash upon all enemies below. This MP does extra damage to divine enemies, and reduces quick card resistance for 3 turns, with the amount varying upon overcharge. This MP is the culmination of all of his other skills, making use of his weapon and his talents for dealing with divine enemies to result in a large attack against them. By using this MP, he is carrying out his role to strike down the gods and demons protecting the Shang dynasty, and so allow for the rise of the Zhou dynasty. Now, with all of this said, I do wish that Taigong Wang did also have some kind of skill that buffed allied party members who had divine or demonic traits, or better yet, temporarily gave them said traits, much like how the 5-star version of Romulus turns people into Romans. Wang's role in the story of the Investiture of the Gods wasn't just about fighting enemy divinities, but also elevating others into divine beings. This is literally what the title of the book means. Yet he can't do that, which feels like a real missed opportunity. Taigong Wang's craft essence is God's smiting rod, depicting his weapon, which is a cross between a whip and a metal rod club thing. The thing is, God's smiting rod is just the English translation for Da Xianbian, meaning that this is just his MP again, with the text just giving extra information about its use. It's like Moriarty and Mephistopheles again, where the MP and CE are the exact same thing. Disappointing. But we can take this opportunity to talk about the rod's other use instead, that of a fishing rod, and Wang's connection to fishing. The story goes that Wang did his fishing with a straight rod and a barbless hook, or sometimes no hook at all. Now, I don't know much about fishing, but I do know that having this setup is not ideal if one wants to actually catch fish. When asked about this, Wang's response is that the fish would come to him when they were ready, a phrase that has also been taken to mean him waiting for a ruler to come seek out his services. As a result, you have a man who is extremely patient and has plenty of time on his hands to think about all sorts of concerns. Apparently doing this for decades on end is the secret ingredient to becoming a master of so many different aspects of government. Now for characterization. When it comes to Taigong Wang, there is the historical Taigong Wang and the one from the novel Investiture of the Gods. Regarding the historical Wang, he was an advisor, strategist, general, etc., to who would become the first kings of the Zhou dynasty, helping in their overthrow of the Shang dynasty. This dates Wang back all the way to the 11th century BCE, meaning this guy is old. Not quite Trojan War or Gilgamesh old, but he's certainly one of the oldest servants in the game. He also predates all three of those ancient Chinese figures everyone knows, Confucius, Sun Tzu, and Lao Tzu. Anyway, Wang served these future Zhou kings in order to overthrow King Zhou of the Shang. Remember what I said at the start about how the same word said in a slightly different way can mean something totally different? This is an example of what I mean. Whereas the dynasty named Zhou connected to a specific region, the Zhou this last Shang dynasty king was named is very different. The short version? It's a posthumous name meant to be an insult. Anyway, King Zhou has been portrayed as a tyrant under the influence of his consort, Daji, and the two of them supposedly engaged in a wide variety of things you would expect loving couples to enjoy together: torture, orgies, and even cannibalism. Fun, fun, fun! Going on a bit of a tangent, I say King Zhou and Daji supposedly did these things because the further back in history you go, the more problematic things get. Ancient historians in many cases were less impartial observers and more agents that served the interests of those in power. You've no doubt heard the expression, history is written by the victors. This is what I mean. We don't know for sure if King Zhou and Daji really were depraved torture freaks, but it certainly does serve as a justification for overthrowing them. Maybe they really were that evil. Maybe not. We will never know. It was over 3,000 years ago. This is further compounded in Daji's case, since stories of wicked or sinful women were often used to justify institutionalized sexism. Daji, Morgan, Medea, Tamamo no Mai, and, probably the oldest of all, Eve from the Book of Genesis. This sort of historical slander becomes a bigger problem the further back you go into history, since far fewer people were illiterate, far fewer records were written, and even fewer survive. I'm not bringing this up now to specifically bash on Taigong Wang, though he is one of the winners of ancient history, but because Wang is by far the oldest historical servant that I have covered, and so the first one where this sort of thing becomes an issue. At least with my next oldest historical servant, Jeanne d'Arc, though bias exists, we at least have records from both sides. This will become a much bigger issue once we move away from historical winners like Taigong Wang to historical losers like Nero. Back on topic, the historical Taigong Wang is credited as being essential for the overthrow of the Shang dynasty. Now, way later during the 16th century, so more than 2,500 years later, a guy named Xu Xiongling wrote a book called Fengsheng, or The Investiture of the Gods. This book takes the original history and wraps it up in all sorts of mythology and mystical stuff. Wang is now a Taoist sage, Daji is now a fox spirit who killed and replaced the original Daji, and the battle to take down the Shang dynasty becomes a big fight between gods, demons, and all sorts of mythical beings. Now, based upon his depiction and dialogue in-game, such as him making use of Taoist sage arts, or references to the Kunlun Mountains and the ancient deity Yuanxi Tianzun, it is quite clear that the developers of FGO went with this mythical version of Taigong Wang. The reason I spent so much time talking about his historical counterpart, though, is because, when you get right down to it, the Taigong Wang from Investiture of the Gods is really just the historical Wang, but now with magic powers, which he needs in order to fight his main enemy, the Fox Spirit Daji. One other thing, this will be far from the last historical Chinese servant we will see given exceptional talent and magic powers by future works of fiction. It's just something they like to do. Now, when it comes to his depiction in Fate Grand Order, fair warning, this is going to spoil the events of Tunguska Sanctuary, which was only just released upon the NA version. Indeed, at the time of recording, the epilogue for Tunguska isn't even out yet. If you have not played through Tunguska, well, you shouldn't really be watching this video, to be honest. Now with that out of the way, let's continue. As Chaldea arrives at the Tunguska Sanctuary to find and attack the immature Beast 4, Koyanskaya, they find two servant allies who are already present, Taigong Wang and Dobrynya Nikitich. Now while Dobrynya is certainly helpful, it is Taigong Wang who is more notable, since Koyanskaya is believed to be one of the Tamamo 9, and Tamamo no Mai is believed to be the same Fox Spirit as Daji, Taigong Wang's mortal enemy. Tamamo's persistent denial of this connection between herself and Daji is a topic for her future video, but the gist of the matter is, if Koyanskaya is connected to Tamamo, and by extension Daji, then Taigong Wang is probably the best person possible for dealing with her. After all, Wang beat Daji before, he can do it again. Indeed, this is what he believes to be the case, and Wang certainly seems quite prepared for it, having set up numerous Taoist spells that would specifically counter Daji, making her easy prey for the final battle against Koyanskaya. Except when the time comes to unleash all of these anti-Daji spells, they prove completely ineffective, because it turns out that Koyanskaya actually has nothing to do with Daji or Tamamo no Mai. To be fair to Wang, this revelation surprised basically everyone, but it still was a massive fail to see this super anti-Daji spell just not work. To his credit though, Wang then decided to take some time to think about the situation, make some conclusions, and come up with a new plan. It is Wang who was able to deduce what Koyanskaya's true nature is, a servant embodying the concept of the Tunguska disaster, a being that cares about nature and the animals inhabiting it. And while sadistic and prone to torturing humans, she doesn't actually care that much about humanity. This results in Wang coming up with a plan that allows everyone to walk away satisfied. Koyanskaya gets to go off into space and maintain her world somewhere far away from humanity, and Chaldea no longer has to worry about Beast 4. Ultimately, Taigong Wang ends up proving his worth as a strategist by analyzing a changing situation and then coming up with a new successful plan. So where does this leave us? Well, we only have Tunguska so far to look at Wang's character, and I don't actually know what, if any, future events he appears in. But based upon what we have seen from him in Tunguska, he seems decent enough. He certainly makes a host of references to Investiture of the Gods and the various Taoist concepts in it. We even get a side moment where he gets to do some fishing, something else Wang is quite famous for. But beyond these little references, the biggest plus side to his characterization is depicting him as a capable strategist and advisor. Yes, he does have that massive failure, but he then turns things around to come up with a new effective plan. Investiture of the Gods is a 100-chapter book. Taigong Wang did not defeat Daji on his first try. He does get compared to Merlin, with Foe deciding to attack him for it, but Wang does seem more reliable, thankfully. One thing to mention, though, is that we do get some brief moments where Wang is thinking of his past encounters with Daji, and his commentary that despite her blatantly evil nature, he couldn't help but find her beautiful. This appears to be an addition FGO made, since neither the historical or mythical Taigong Wang considered Daji anything more than a serious enemy. Overall, Taigong Wang's characterization is decent, acting as a capable advisor, strategist, and master of the Taoist arts that he is often portrayed as in history and in fictional works. And now for the verdict. What grade would I give Taigong Wang's depiction in Fate Grand Order? Well, it's alright. His character design and skill set are competent, though it is missing some things I wish they had included. Having the MP and craft essence be the same thing was annoying to see, but I guess it still does work due to his weapon being so multi-purpose. As for characterization, Wang proved his worth during Tunguska, though only after that massive embarrassing failure that, if we are being honest, isn't something I can entirely blame him for. After all, he fell for a massive red herring, just like everyone else. I'm still not sure how I feel about that particular story twist, but the fact that Wang was able to quickly move past that failure, then come up with a new, better plan that succeeded, that speaks well for his capabilities. I do wonder what role he might play in future events. And so for a final grade, I am going to give Taigong Wang, also known as Jiang Ziya, a B-. He is competently depicted, but there is still some room for improvements to be made, particularly towards his skill set. Perhaps he will get skill upgrades in the future to fix that. Anyway, if you would like to learn more about another character with a tendency for wordy explanations, check out my video on Sherlock Holmes here. Until next time.